Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for more lost treasure stories. Please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell by the subscribe button. Relax and enjoy. Today we're diving into a captivating legend that has persisted for centuries, the lost treasure of Delbach. This is a story of Jesuit missionaries, Native American tribes, and a silver mine that may hold the key to a fortune. So sit back, relax, and let's journey to the sun-baked lands of southern Arizona. Our story begins in the year 1700 at a place called San Xavier del Bac. Located on the west bank of the Santa Cruz River, just a few miles south of what is now Tucson, Arizona, this site would become home to one of the most beautiful and enduring missions in the American Southwest. On April 28th of that year, a Jesuit priest named Father Eusebio Francisco Quino wrote in his diary, "We laid the foundation of a very large and spacious church." Little did Father Quino know that this simple act would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to one of the most enduring mysteries in the region. As the foundation was laid and construction began in earnest, something unexpected happened. The headmen of the local Papago tribe approached Father Quino with an intriguing proposition. They wanted to show him something valuable hidden in the nearby mountains. Father Quino followed these tribal leaders into the rugged terrain southwest of Bac. After a journey of about 2 leagues, roughly 6 miles, they arrived at their destination. There, before Father Quino's eyes, was a sight that would change the course of the mission's history, a rich vein of silver ore. The story goes that Father Quino was delighted by what he saw. The ore had a distinctive green color, characteristic of horn silver. Impressed by its appearance, Quino dubbed the site La Esmeralda, the Emerald. Without hesitation, he made arrangements to begin mining operations immediately. In the days that followed, the rich ore was extracted from La Esmeralda and transported to the mission on the backs of Native American workers. At the mission, a small adobe furnace was constructed for smelting the silver. It seemed that San Xavier del Bac was on its way to becoming not just a spiritual center, but a source of significant wealth as well. However, the story of La Esmeralda and its silver was just beginning. Father Quino passed away on March 15, 1711 in Magdalena, Sonora, where his remains still rest in the ruins of the old church. With his death, the missions he had established entered a turbulent period. The years following Quino's death were marked by minor revolts and constant attacks from Apache tribes. Despite these challenges, the mission at San Xavier del Bac continued to prosper. By 1723, the treasure and silver ornaments adorning the altar were estimated to be worth more than 120,000 pesos, a fortune by the standards of the time. But trouble was brewing. In that same year, 1723, the first major revolt of the Papago and Pima tribes erupted. As chaos descended upon the mission, a group of loyal Papago neophytes took matters into their own hands. In a daring move, they secretly carried the treasure from the altar to the Esmeralda mine and buried it deep within its underground workings. This act of preservation came just in time. The revolt left the churches at Bac, Tumacacori, and Guavavi partially destroyed and without spiritual advisors. For years, the mission stood silent, their treasures hidden away in the depths of the earth. But the story of San Xavier del Bac was far from over. In 1731, a small group of Jesuit reinforcements arrived in the area. 2 of these priests, Father Felipe Segesser and Father Juan Baptista Grasshoffer, established what are considered the first Spanish settlements in Arizona. Father Segesser took charge of San Xavier del Bac, while Father Grasshoffer oversaw San Miguel de Guavavi. For the next 2 decades, a succession of Jesuit priests tended to the mission at San Xavier del Bac. They found that many of the native settlements from Kino's time had been abandoned, but they persevered in their efforts to rebuild and maintain the mission. However, peace was short-lived. In 1751, a second revolt of the Pima tribes shook the region. This time, the violence was even more severe. 3 priests, Francisco Xavier Saeta, Thomas Rollo, and Enrique Ruin, lost their lives. The missions at Sonoita and Caborca were completely destroyed, while Gavavi, Tumacacori, and San Xavier del Bac were damaged and abandoned by all but a few loyal followers. It wasn't until 1754 that the native tribes returned to their pueblos, expressing a desire to live peacefully once again. With this newfound peace came a momentous event. The great treasure was brought out of hiding from the Esmeralda mine and returned to its place on the altar of San Xavier del Bac. For the next decade or so, San Xavier del Bac experienced a golden age. The mission prospered greatly from agriculture, mining, and stock raising. It became one of the most flourishing outposts in the long chain of missions established during Kino's time. But as we've seen throughout this tale, times of prosperity were often followed by periods of turmoil. In 1767, King Charles of Spain issued a decree that would once again throw the missions into chaos. His edict expelled all members of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, from Spain and its possessions. The Jesuits accepted their expulsion with dignity. Before departing, they took steps to protect the wealth they had accumulated. They sealed the mines and buried their treasures, then made their way to the coast where ships waited to carry them away from the land they had called home for so long. In the wake of the Jesuits' departure, and before the arrival of the Franciscans who were to replace them, many of the missions fell into ruin. San Xavier del Bac was partially destroyed, but it was never completely abandoned. The Papago people, who had come to love the beautiful mission, continued to care for it as best they could. The next chapter in the story of San Xavier del Bac began in 1783, when Padre Carrillo laid the foundations for a new church, the very structure that still stands today, noted for its beautiful mission architecture and still in sacred use. But the tumultuous history of the region wasn't finished yet. In 1822, the fall of the colonial government led to the departure of the Franciscans. San Xavier del Bac and the Esmeralda mine were placed under the care of a secular priest from Magdalena by the Bishop of Sonora. It's a testament to the dedication of the Papago people that despite all these changes, the church and its treasures remained largely intact. When the region was added to the Diocese of New Mexico under Bishop Lamy in 1859, San Xavier del Bac stood as the only mission in the long chain that wasn't in ruins. The arrival of a new priest was met with joy by the Papago. They rang the church bells in celebration, and many still remembered their prayers. Some could even sing at Mass. Most importantly, the articles for the altar, including, presumably, the silver treasures, were once again brought out from their hiding place. In 1860, American miners operating in the area reported seeing the treasure on the altar at San Xavier del Bac. They estimated its value at more than $60,000, an enormous sum for the time. But once again, conflict would disrupt the peace. In 1861, with the outbreak of the American Civil War, soldiers were withdrawn from Arizona to fight in the east. The Apaches seized this opportunity to resume their raids on small mines and ranches, and once again, the great treasure of San Xavier del Bac disappeared. So, what became of this fabled treasure? According to tradition among the local Native Americans, the silver still lies buried deep within the old workings of the Esmeralda mine. They say it rests at the bottom of a large stope that has since caved in, buried under hundreds of tons of rock and earth. But the story doesn't end there. Every year, just before the feast of San Juan on June 24th, something curious happened. The amount of rich silver ore brought to buyers in Tucson and Nogales showed a marked increase. Most of the silver came from 2 or 3 elderly Papago men who lived near the mission on the banks of the Santa Cruz River. Many old-time Mexican residents of Tucson believe this ore came from the dump and shallow surface workings of the Lost Esmeralda mine. It's widely understood in the area that many of the older Papago knew the location of the mine and its treasure, but they steadfastly refused to disclose this information to anyone outside their tribe. And so, the mystery of the lost treasure of Del Bac persists to this day. Is there really a fortune in silver hidden somewhere in the mountains near Tucson? Do the Papago elders truly hold the secret to its location? Or is this simply a colorful legend born from the dramatic history of this beautiful old mission? Whatever the truth may be, the story of San Xavier del Bac and the Esmeralda mine serves as a powerful reminder of the complex history of the American Southwest. It speaks to the intertwining of cultures, Spanish, Native American, and later American, and the enduring impact of the mission system on the region. As you walk the grounds of San Xavier del Bac today, gazing up at its beautiful white towers against the azure Arizona sky, it's hard not to wonder about the secrets it might still hold. Perhaps somewhere in the rugged landscape nearby, the lost silver of La Esmeralda still waits to be rediscovered. This has been the Southwest Desert. I'm your host, Alan, thanking you for joining us on this journey into the legends of the Southwest. Remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories are hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover them. Until next time, keep exploring, and who knows what treasures you might find. Welcome, treasure hunters and history buffs, to another episode of Southwest Desert. Today we're diving into a fascinating tale of lost mines, Jesuit priests, and buried treasures that will take us on a journey through time and across the rugged landscapes of the American Southwest. Our story begins in the early 16th century, in a region the early Spanish explorers called Primeria Alta, what we now know as parts of Arizona and New Mexico. It's a tale that has persisted for centuries, capturing the imagination of adventurers and prospectors alike. So sit back, relax, and let's unravel the mystery of the Lost Jesuit silver mine. It's 1508, about 10 years before the Spanish first set foot on the eastern coast of Mexico. The Opata Native Americans, native to the region, stumble upon something extraordinary. Pieces of rich native silver float and the outcrop of a vein. Little did they know that this discovery would set in motion a chain of events that would echo through the centuries. Fast forward to the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. They quickly caught wind of this silver discovery and wasted no time in taking control of the mine. By 1750, the mine was in full operation under Spanish control. In that same year, the second revolt of the Pima tribes erupted. Missions were plundered and partially destroyed. It wasn't until 1752 that peace was restored, and another 2 years before the missions were reoccupied. But our story doesn't end there. Now, let's fast forward to 1767. King Charles III of Spain issues a shocking edict. All Jesuit priests are to be expelled from Spain and its colonies. Why, you ask? Well, one reason was their alleged failure to pay the royal fifth, a 20% tax on all gold and silver produced. But here's where it gets really interesting. Legend has it that before their expulsion, the Jesuit fathers had not only located rich gold and silver mines, but had also amassed a fortune in precious metals. Faced with their impending exile, what did they do? They concealed the mines and buried their accumulated wealth, hoping to return for it one day. Now, let's zoom in on one particular mine that's at the heart of our story today, La Purísima Concepción, or the Pure Conception Mine. According to old church records brought from Spain by Don Ricardo Ortiz of Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico, and Don Santiago Diaz, former governor of Lower California, this was one of the richest mines ever discovered in the region. But where exactly was this mine? Well, grab your maps, listeners, because we're going on a treasure hunt. The records state that La Purísima Concepción was located 4 leagues, that's about 12 miles, south of the Tumacacori mission. From there, you'd head straight through the pass of Los Llanos, about 3 leagues south of the Guadalupe mine. Keep going until you reach another gateway or pass called the Gateway to Agua Hondo, or deep water. From this pass, a creek runs south, emptying onto the desert near the old town of Santa Cruz. The mine itself? It's to the east of the pass. But that's not all. Below the pass, on the bank of the creek, you'd find 12 arrastres and 12 patios. For those of you not versed in old mining techniques, arrastres were primitive ore crushing mills, and patios were areas where the crushed ore was processed. Now here's where it gets really exciting. At the mine, there's supposedly a tunnel 300 varas long, that's about 835 feet, running north. But wait, there's more. About 200 varas from the portal of this tunnel, a crosscut 100 varas long leads west. And the ore at the face of this crosscut? It's described as yellow, half silver, and 1/5 gold. Can you imagine the riches? 50 varas from the mouth of the mine in a southerly direction, the records claim you'd find slabs or balls of silver, weighing anywhere from 25 to 250 pounds each. And if you're worried about missing the entrance, don't be. According to the records, the name La Purísima Concepción is chiseled into the rock above the tunnel. Oh, and did I mention the copper door fastened with a large iron lock? Now you might be thinking, this all sounds too good to be true. Surely someone must have found this mine by now? Well, listeners, that's where our tale takes an intriguing turn. You see, there's a mass of evidence suggesting that this old mine is located in a narrow pass between the west end of the Pajarita Mountains and a place called El Ruido, the Mountain of Noises. Over the years, there have been tantalizing glimpses and near misses. Let me tell you about a few of them. Years ago, in Naga Laws, a saloon keeper grub-staked an old prospector. That means he funded the prospector's expedition in exchange for a share of any findings. The old fellow disappeared for about 6 weeks. Then one day, he showed up in front of the saloon with 2 burros loaded down with large chunks of native silver. He claimed to have found them scattered over the surface of the ground in the pass between the Pajaritas and El Ruido. Excited by his find, the old prospector started celebrating his good fortune. Tragically, he was found dead the next morning. The saloon keeper, try as he might, was never able to find the place where the old prospector had made his discovery. But that's not the only tantalizing tale. Shortly after the Mexican War and the signing of the Gadsden Treaty, another old prospector based in Tubac made frequent trips to the Pajaritas and El Ruido. Each time he returned with large pieces of native silver. The source of his finds remained a mystery. And the stories don't end there. In 1950s, another prospector set up camp in the pass. After a couple of weeks of prospecting, disaster struck. A cloudburst sent a wall of water down the creek near his tent, washing away his camp. The prospector himself was never found. But here's where it gets really interesting. The day before the cloudburst, this prospector had given his partner a roll of undeveloped films. When these films were later developed, they showed something extraordinary. The entrance to an old mine working and the front wall of an old mission or chapel that had never before been seen in this part of the country. This little church was probably a visita for the Tumacacori mission, not unlike those frequently built by Spanish-American miners near their workplaces. Could this have been the entrance to the legendary La Purísima Concepción mine? Now, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The Tumakakori mission, founded in 1691, was at the heart of Jesuit mining operations in the area. We don't know exactly how long the Jesuit fathers worked the mines, but we do know they were operating a number of gold and silver mines in the surrounding mountains right up until their expulsion in 1767. The scale of their operations was impressive. Discoveries of adobe smelters on the east side of the mission indicate extensive mining activities. And get this, according to some accounts, 2,050 mule loads of virgin silver and 205 loads of gold bullion were taken from the Tumakakori mission by the Padres and concealed in the Guadalupe mine, located about a league southwest of the mission ruins. But why haven't these treasures been found? Well, the Jesuits were clever, foreseeing that they wouldn't be able to take their treasure with them when expelled. They're said to have buried it near the missions or in the mines themselves, hoping to return for it later. Of course, they never got the chance. Now, let's talk geology for a moment. The area where La Purísima Conception is believed to be located has some interesting features that could explain the rich silver finds. There are kaolin outcroppings in the pass between the Pacharitas and El Ruido. These outcrops consist of kaolin, iron-stained quartz, and occasionally large nuggets of native silver. The Old Spanish records often mention finding native silver in veins of kaolin, or caliche, as they called it. Most of the rich minerals originally contained in these veins have been leached and carried down to water level, where they've been precipitated as secondary enrichment. This geological process creates an interesting phenomenon. It's not uncommon in desert country to find rich outcrops of silver ore near the surface, while directly underneath, the ore has been leached out. Many old Spanish workings were abandoned when they hit this leached zone, instead of continuing down to water level where secondary enrichment almost certainly awaits. Here's a thought to ponder. How many of these old workings closed down when they entered the leached zone or abandoned after the demonetization of silver could be reopened today? It's worth noting that most silver mines in southern Arizona carry a high percentage of copper as well. As we near the end of our tale, let's not forget the eerie atmosphere surrounding these lost mines. Mexican and Native American vaqueros believed El Ruido was haunted and avoided it as much as possible. So, where does this leave us? With a tantalizing mystery, to be sure. The story of La Purísima Conception Mine, as set forth in the old Spanish documents, seems to have a ring of truth to it. The numerous findings of native silver float in the pass, and at the Planchas de Plata mine a short distance to the south in Sonora, Mexico, lend credence to the tale. But the mine, if it exists, remains hidden. Is it still out there, waiting to be rediscovered? Are the Jesuit treasures still buried, untouched after all these centuries? Or has nature reclaimed these sites, erasing all traces of their existence? The tale of the lost Jesuit silver mine reminds us that history is full of mysteries, some of which may never be solved. But it's in the seeking, in the exploration and the wonder that we often find the greatest treasures. This has been Southwest Desert reminding you that sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones that lead us into the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring, keep wondering, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to unlock the secrets of the lost Jesuit silver mine. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Southwest Desert. Today, we're delving into a fascinating tale from the American Southwest, the legend of the lost treasure of Old Guavavi. This story takes us back to the 18th century, to a time when Jesuit missionaries were establishing their presence in what is now Arizona, Sonora, and Lower California. So sit back, relax, and let's journey through time to uncover the secrets of Guavavi. Our story begins in 1767, a pivotal year in the history of the New World. King Charles of Spain had just issued a decree that would change the course of history for many in the Americas. The edict called for the expulsion of all Jesuit fathers from the New World, forcing them to abandon the missions they had worked so hard to establish. But here's where the legend takes root. As the story goes, these Jesuit fathers, faced with their sudden expulsion, didn't leave empty-handed. Instead, they allegedly buried great caches of gold, silver, and jewels before their hasty departure. This act of desperation gave birth to a legend that has persisted for centuries, captivating the imaginations of treasure hunters and history buffs alike. Now, let's focus our attention on one particular mission, Givavi. Located near the small farming community of Calabasas, a short distance northeast of Nogales, Arizona, Givavi was no ordinary mission. Established in 1691, it stood as a testament to the Jesuit presence in the region for over 7 decades. While many regarded Givavi as primarily an agricultural mission, rumors suggest it held a secret. The Padres, in need of metal for various purposes, are said to have sent Native American miners into the surrounding hills in search of suitable ores. Little did they know that this seemingly innocent quest for materials would lead to a discovery that would change the mission's fate. According to local lore, the Native American miners brought back specimens of heavy black silver-copper ore. This ore is believed to have come from the head of a rocky canyon in the southwest end of the rugged San Cayetano Mountains, just a short distance north of the mission. The Padres were delighted with their find. They used the ore to mold bells for the church, and the result was so pleasing that they decided to continue working the mine. Soon, ore was being regularly mined and transported on the backs of mules to a furnace constructed near the mission. What started as a practical endeavor soon turned into something more. After supplying the altar with beautiful hand-molded candlesticks and other articles, the Padres turned their attention to creating everyday items. They fashioned cups, plates, bowls, and other household utensils from the silver recovered from smelting the rich ore. The mine's proximity to the mission added to its allure. It's said that on a still day, the miners could hear the sweet-toned bells ringing and the dogs barking in the little pueblo on the east bank of the wide arroyo. As the mission's wealth grew, so did the complications. Under Spanish law, 1/5 of all bullion from mines worked by the Jesuits belonged to the King of Spain, known as the Royal Fifth. However, rumors suggest that the Jesuits weren't always diligent in paying this royal tax. This alleged failure to pay the Royal Fifth is believed to be one of the reasons behind King Charles III's decision to expel the Jesuits. The growing tensions between the Crown and the Jesuit order would soon come to a head, with dramatic consequences for missions like Givavi. The years leading up to the expulsion were not peaceful for Givavi and other missions in the region. In 1750, the Second Revolt of the Pima tribes erupted. This uprising resulted in the murder of Padres at Caborca and Sonoita, and the beautiful missions of San Xavier and Givavi were plundered and partially destroyed. Despite these setbacks, the Jesuits persevered, continuing their work at Givavi and other missions. Little did they know that their time in the New World was drawing to a close. When King Charles III's edict reached the New World in 1767, it set off a chain of events that would give rise to the legend we're exploring today. Faced with sudden expulsion and unable to take their accumulated wealth with them, the Jesuits reportedly took drastic action. According to the legend, they sealed the entrances to their mines and buried their treasures. At Givavi, it's said that the bells, altar service, candlesticks, and all manner of household and cooking utensils were collected and stored in a secret hiding place near the mission ruins. The Jesuits then fled to the coast, hoping to board ships that would return them to Spain. Tragically, many of them never made it, falling victim to hostile Native Americans along the way. For nearly a century, Givavi and its supposed hidden treasures lay dormant, It wasn't until 1859 that the first Americans arrived in the Santa Cruz Valley. What they found reignited interest in the old Jesuit missions and their potential riches. These early American settlers discovered large piles of slag at various locations, including Tubac, Tumacacori, Cerro Colorado, and Guavavi. Much of this slag was rich in silver, and enterprising miners shipped it off at a good profit. At Guavavi itself, most of the land where the old adobe smelter and slag pile stood has since been cultivated. While there are no visible signs of the old furnace, farmers occasionally turned up rich pieces of silver ore with their plows, keeping the legend alive. Our story now shifts to the early 1900s, focusing on a character who adds another layer of intrigue to the Guavavi legend. Meet Juan Bustamante, an old woodchopper and pocket miner who lived near the mission ruins in about 1912. Juan made his living panning for gold in the summer and selling stove wood in Nogales during the winter. He was a familiar face at Charlie Taylor's assay office, where he would sell small vials of placer gold. But one hot summer day, Juan surprised everyone by arriving at Taylor's office with his 2 burros loaded down with sacks of rich silver ore instead of his usual cargo. This unexpected delivery caused quite a stir among the local miners, but Juan refused to disclose the source of his newfound wealth. Juan's silver deliveries became an annual event, always occurring around the feast of San Juan on June 24th. This timing wasn't coincidental. There's a superstition among many old-time Spanish Americans that bathing in running water on San Juan Day ensures good health for the coming year. So every year after his ritual bath, Juan would load his faithful burros with rich silver-copper ore and head to Nogales for the Fiesta of San Juan. It was during one of these festive trips that Juan inadvertently revealed a clue to his secret. On the second day of a particularly lively fiesta, Juan, full of his beloved red wine and traditional foods, dozed off for a siesta. In his troubled sleep, the old prospector talked loudly about a rich silver mine he had discovered high up in a rocky canyon on the southwest side of the rugged San Cayetano mountain. A newly made friend who was not quite as inebriated overheard Juan's sleep-talking. The day after the fiesta, this man set out with a companion to search for the mine Juan had unwittingly described. After several days of hard work, the 2 Mexican searchers found some very heavy silver-copper ore at the mouth of a deep, rocky canyon that matched Juan's drunken description. High up near the head of the canyon, they made another intriguing discovery, a partly burned crucifix that appeared to have been washed out of a tunnel. This find was significant because Mexican and Native American miners traditionally place a crucifix at the mouth of any mine they're working. The crucifix was taken to the Tumacacori mission, where it remained for many years. Despite their initial success, the 2 men were unable to locate the actual rich vein or the old tunnel during their subsequent trips. The heavy rains that frequently occur in the area had likely covered any remaining traces. Unaware that he had revealed his secret, Juan continued to make several clandestine trips to the mine after the fiesta. His last load of ore was purchased by Taylor for $150, a significant sum at the time. The day after this final sale, Juan arrived at his son-in-law's house with his 2 burros loaded down with provisions and a supply of his beloved red wine. Tragically, he was found dead on his pallet the next morning, taking the secret of the mine's location with him to his grave. To this day, neither Juan's mine nor the great treasure supposedly buried near the mission walls has ever been found. The rooms of Guavavi stand empty, the voices of the padres, Native American children, and neophytes long since silenced. All that remains of the once thriving mission are a small part of the thick adobe walls, a remnant of the altar, and a few silent graves. These sparse ruins serve as a poignant reminder of the Padres and the indigenous people who once called Gavavi home. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tale. The lost treasure of Old Gavavi remains just that, lost. But the legend continues to captivate imaginations and draw curious visitors to this day. Perhaps somewhere in the rugged landscape surrounding the old mission, beneath layers of earth and time, lie the riches of Guavavi, the silver bars, the ornate candlesticks, the beautifully crafted utensils. Or perhaps the true treasure is the story itself, a testament to the complex history of the American Southwest and the enduring allure of hidden wealth. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time and legend. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next great hidden treasure. Deep in the heart of southern Arizona, where the rugged Tascosa Mountains cast long shadows across ancient mission trails, lies a mystery that has tantalized treasure hunters for generations. It's a tale that begins in the dusty streets of old Arivaca Pueblo and winds its way through rocky canyons and mesquite-covered foothills. This is the story of the Carreta Canyon treasure, a legacy of the Jesuit fathers who once ruled these lands, and the incredible wealth they left behind. Our story begins not with the treasure itself, but with a remarkable discovery in the old pueblo of Arivaca. In a weathered adobe house standing on the main street, a piece of silver ore was found. Not just any ore, but one that assayed at thousands of ounces per ton. This single discovery would reignite interest in one of the Southwest's most compelling mysteries, a lost silver mine and an extraordinary cache of treasure said to be hidden in its tunnels. Let's paint a picture of how this story came to light through one of its key witnesses, Don Manuel Gonzalez, who arrived in Arivaca in the early 1880s, during a time when the wild Apache still roamed free. Visitors would find Don Manuel taking his siesta in the noonday sun, a common practice in old Arivaca. The view from his veranda was spectacular, far across the Altar Valley to the northwest. A fleecy cloud hung like a bridal veil from Baboquivari Peak's lofty summit, the highest peak in southern Arizona. Don Manuel's hospitality followed the time-honored customs of Spanish-American courtesy. He would immediately offer his guests his house, his garden, and everything he possessed. Then would come the inevitable cafecita, marking the beginning of what would often become a fascinating conversation. On one particular afternoon, Don Manuel lit a cigarette, offered one to his guest, and sat contemplating the lighted match, seemingly lost in deep thought. Only when the rings of smoke began drifting up over the cool veranda did he stir from his reverie, ready to share the extraordinary tale. According to Don Manuel, the story truly began to unfold when 3 Mexican vaqueros set out to round up cattle grazing on the western foothills of the Tumacacori and Tascosa Mountains. Their chuck wagon camp was strategically placed near the mouth of Jalisco Canyon, just a few miles east of Arivaca, providing easy access to the cattle-rich foothills. The vaqueros split up, each riding in a different direction to gather the scattered cattle. One of these vaqueros, riding southward, found himself near the head of a long, rocky canyon on the western slopes of the Tascosa Range, close to a pass that led to the deep canyons gashing the south side. As he surveyed the landscape spread before him, he made an extraordinary discovery. His horse was standing on an old mine dump, and nearby stood the entrance to a tunnel sealed with a heavy oaken door. This wasn't just any door. It bore a handmade hasp and staple, secured by a large padlock of distinctly Spanish or early Mexican design. The vaquero collected several pieces of ore from the dump before continuing his pursuit of the wandering cattle. But what truly set this discovery apart was what he found a short distance below the tunnel: the remains of an old carreta, one of the ox carts commonly used by the Padres during the Spanish colonial period. That evening, around the campfire, the vaquero showed his ore samples and spoke of the locked tunnel. His companions met his tale with skepticism, and perhaps discouraged by their ridicule, he said no more about it. The samples he kept would later find their way to Casa Grande, Arizona, providing tangible evidence of extraordinary mineral wealth. Years later, a group of Spaniards arrived from San Francisco, carrying ancient Spanish documents that described a fabulously rich silver mine in the region. These documents spoke of a lost treasure from the Tumacacori mission, hidden away by a Jesuit priest. Crucially, they mentioned a specific guidepost to the mine, an abandoned carreta near the tunnel entrance. The historical record provides an unexpected verification of at least part of this tale. In the spring of 1886, soldiers pursuing Apache raiders who had attacked the Peck Ranch passed by an old carreta high in what would later be named Carreta Canyon. Though engaged in their grim pursuit, the raiders had killed the ranch owners, leaving only their baby boy Al alive. These soldiers unknowingly witnessed a piece of the puzzle, even if they were too focused on their mission to recognize its significance. But to truly understand how this treasure came to be hidden, we must turn to the testimony of Calestro, an Opata Native American born and raised near the Tumacacori mission. Calestro's account, passed down through 3 generations of Opata Native Americans, takes us back to 1750, when the Pima tribes rose up against their Spanish oppressors. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of Spanish oppression, a desperate attempt by indigenous peoples to reclaim their autonomy. As the uprising spread, the padre in charge of the mines and mission made a crucial decision. With the help of a few loyal native converts, he began loading the mission's most precious possessions into a carreta drawn by 2 oxen. The cargo included all the altar fixtures, numerous bars of gold and silver bullion, and most intriguingly, a small copper box containing maps to 8 mines and crucial church records. In the first light of dawn, they set out. A Native American walked alongside, guiding the slow-moving oxen along an ancient road that can still be traced today. Their route wasn't random. It followed a carefully chosen path, portions of which remain visible. Near the Isabella mine, the road can still be seen cut into solid rock on the hillside, just west of the Isabella shaft and the ruins of an old rock house. These enduring marks in the landscape stand as silent testimony to the engineering capabilities of the Spanish colonizers and the importance of this route in their time. They skirted the foothills below the San Pedro mine, winding through mesquite thickets toward the Tascosa Mountains. There, they encountered an unexpected complication, a pack train from the Altar Mission in Sonora. The news these newcomers brought was grim. The uprising had spread to Altar, where several Spaniards had been killed. Even worse, 3 padres at Sonoita had been murdered, their bodies thrown into an underground room with their mission's treasure before the buildings were demolished. Faced with this dire situation, the padres made a fateful decision. They would conceal their combined treasures, the cartload from Tumacacori, and 8-pack mule loads from the Altar Mission, in a nearby silver mine tunnel. They abandoned their carreta and 6 of their mules before making their way to the coast and the ships that would carry them to exile. In 1767, King Charles III of Spain issued a decree that would change everything. The Jesuit order was to be expelled from Spain and all its territories. The padres who had hidden their treasures were forced to flee, never to return. Today, the story lives on in the memories of those who call this region home. In the old pueblo of Arivaca, where Don Manuel once held court on his veranda, life continues much as it did in his day. The Gitana dance hall and bar still stands, its doors open to the evening air, the sound of guitars mixing with the laughter of dark-eyed señoritas and the animated conversations of vaqueros and gambuchinos. The modern town of Casa Grande holds its own piece of this mystery through that remarkable piece of silver ore that started many on their quest to uncover the truth. The old Spanish document that brought treasure hunters from San Francisco may still exist somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten archive or private collection, waiting to be rediscovered. And what of the copper box? If found, it wouldn't just reveal the location of the Corretta's treasure, but would unlock the secret of 8 lost mines, each one potentially as rich as the samples suggest. The maps within could lead to what might be one of the greatest mineral discoveries in Arizona's history. Somewhere up there, beyond the mesquite and rock, past the Isabella mine's weathered ruins, that heavy oak door may still stand, its Spanish padlock holding fast against time itself. The treasure, the altar fixtures, the gold and silver bullion, the precious documents and maps, might still rest in that hidden tunnel, watched over by the remains of that loyal Opata Indian who made the ultimate sacrifice to protect its secrets. The physical evidence remains tantalizing. The rich ore samples, the carved road still visible in the rock, the accounts of multiple witnesses over different eras, and the old carreta itself, seen by those American soldiers. These pieces of the puzzle suggest that somewhere in these sun-baked hills, a fortune in Spanish colonial treasure still awaits discovery. Until that discovery comes, the mystery of Carreta Canyon will continue to intrigue each new generation, a testament to a time when Jesuit fathers fled their missions in haste, leaving behind not just material wealth, but a story that would become part of the very fabric of Arizona's history. Their treasure, whether real or legendary, remains one of the Southwest's most enduring mysteries, waiting in the shadows of the Tascosa Range for someone to finally unlock its secrets. I hope you enjoyed these lost Southwest tales. If you would like to help support my channel and time, hit the super thanks heart icon on the bottom of the video and contribute. This is very helpful. Please check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists. Happy trails!